Anybody has questions? Yes, the director is that.
We have no, we don't have one.
Okay, so.
Oh,
just
yes,
get-
yes, we do. So that everybody can hear your question, please raise your hand, and we have a volunteer who's going to be bringing the mic to you. Thank you.
So Olga, congratulations on your book. I'm looking forward to reading it. I wanted to ask you about the broader political influences on these women who were involved in the nationalist movement. The two stories that you told today focused on the force of personality of Pedro Albizu Campos in inspiring these women to join the nationalist cause. But we have work from historians of women's movements in the early 20th century who show that women are actively involved in liberation movements in places like Mexico or Cuba. And I was wondering if you found any evidence of Puerto Rican nationalist women who had some sort of intellectual or political connection to the nationalist movement, independent of the force of personality of Pedro Albizu Campos.
Thank you, John. That's a great question. No, actually I didn't, and I'm not sure that it wasn't there. It's just that I was focused on a very narrow path to writing 16 biographies of women by collecting newspapers and all that is very hard. But what I found is, after Puerto Rico became, a colony of the United States, it became essentially an island culture. And what I mean by that is very circumscribed, where before 1898, oh, thank you for that, because that's driving me blind. Before 1898, Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans looked to Spain. But they had a great connection to Cuba, to Mexico, and to the Dominican Republic and others. So in that sense, it was more international in its outlook. Yet at that point, women were not being organized or any such thing. In fact, the suffragist movement, which begins in Puerto Rico in early 1914 to 1917, it's really more of sui generis, just an internal, and again, now they're looking to the United States to help them to become, to have the right to vote and all that. So your question is very interesting, but I didn't go in that direction. I'm sure there would be information, but I didn't go, because I was more interested in seeing their political deeds. And as far as I'm concerned, from what I found, their main source of inspiration is going to be not only Pedro Albizu Campos, but several other members of the intelligentsia of Puerto Rico who were in favor, like Matienzo Cintrón and others who were in favor of independence. It's just that Don Pedro Albizu Campos just kind of channels these energies, because he's going to be very not only supportive of women, but respectful of women. He actually offers them a place in history, while the others expected them to be auxiliaries. So that's my answer in a nutshell.
Griselda Barry. Olga, could you, as a historian, could you talk a little bit about the challenges of getting this information, particularly in Puerto Rico, and did you also get to meet any, are there any of them alive, so just get a sense of the background?
Yeah, I
book.
skipped that because I didn't want to take so much time. It was a huge job. It took me 4 years to piece together all this information. And I started out by interviewing 5 women. 2 of them had been in prison, 3 of them had not. 2 of the 5 were the daughters of the Collazos. For example, Rosa Collazo's daughter, Lydia, who's still alive and lives in Cataño. I interviewed her for many hours. I interviewed Oscar Collazo's daughter, because they're half-sisters, Carmen Zoraida. And then I also interviewed a woman that everybody thought was dead. Nobody thought that they said, if you see her, just stay away, because they thought it would be the spirit. Well, I found her. She was a wonderful woman, already probably with a little bit of, first signs of dementia, whatever. But she had been very active in 1948 and had formed a chapter in Rio Piedras. So that is what started me, those 5 interviews. Actually, I went to Puerto Rico to rest because I had just finished a book and handed it to the publisher. And I thought, well, this is a nice time to go sit on the beach and whatever. And before you know it, I kind of ambled over to the Puerto Rican General Archives, and talking to one of the archivists, she said to me, 2 of the women that you're looking for are alive, and they went to prison. So it took me about 4 months of chasing these 2 women, but in the meantime, I did all the research so that I could ask the questions, because you can't just sit with a tape recorder and expect them to tell you the story, And there are contradictions in everybody's story, so you have to make sure that you know how to evaluate what people are telling you. Because I'm trained in oral history as well. So anyway, so then the archives, the documents had just been released because the documents have been under lock and key by the government, by the Puerto Rican police, and they were called los documentos encadenados, or the chain documents. And it took a whole decade of court battles and injunctions by a lawyer by the name of David Noriega and several others to actually get these documents released. And one of the best things about it is that he actually made a condition that the documents could not be redacted. Because when you get a lot of FBI files, and I read through tons of those, a lot of them are, by the time they're declassified, they're also redacted. So you have to really work very hard to put any kind of story together. But these documents were unredacted except for the names of the informants. But here and there, they escaped. For example, I learned that one of the most horrible informants was Lolita Lebron's brother. I actually found his entire testimony, which I have, and I've translated, and one of these days I'm going to publish. Jason. Okay. I told my husband that we were going to go to the beach and rest. The other person who was an informant was Juan Alamo Diaz's brother. Juan Alamo Diaz was a fantastic human being who had lived in the Bronx in the 1940s and actually gave a home to Pedro Albizu Campos when he was released from prison in 1943. So Pedro was very, very ill. So finding these things, you become totally fascinated because it just gives you the complexity of human beings. Here is Juan Alamo Diaz, who probably was a very good person and a good brother to his brother Pedro, but then he rats on him to the secret police. Let me tell you, the one thing I found is that during the 1930s, there were hardly any jobs in Puerto Rico because of the Depression. But somehow, all of these informants were being paid by the secret police and the FBI. Because in Puerto Rico, there were 5 agencies following you around. It was the FBI, the secret police, the intelligence section of the Navy, the intelligence section of the Army, and God knows, it was like 5. So all of these people are being paid to be informants, which is pretty sad, because when the United States first took over, they found 2 people who were willing to rat on their compatriots. By the 1930s, there's a whole ton of them. So finding the documents, they said, was a huge task in itself, okay? Then I had to find the newspaper articles that discuss all of these things. And I tell you, I'm very respectful of journalists because they are describing the event as it unfolds. Some of them were more impartial than others, but in the end, they gave you the story. So then I know who's sitting on the witness chair, what is he saying, and then I can choose from that what portion I am going to, because writing history is selecting stuff. It's telling your story. That's why in my book I said I'm writing my version of their stories.